So much for the very warm invitation. And also it's a real privilege for me to be here, to meet with these great people and all of you and really share my experiences with you. So I'm really looking forward also to learn a lot from this conference. So I'm not necessarily the one who is going to give you a lot, but I'm looking forward to learn a lot from you. And I really also like the theme of the conference. So it's quite inspirational. So I've tried to give a good side of the story, because the story is not always very good, but I've tried to give a good side of the story of some of the work that we are doing, and maybe we'll talk about the challenges much later. So, after hearing what we had this morning about the UN, maybe I don't know whether to talk about the black box or the other side of the box, but I'll try and see. Maybe we can talk about the black box later. So I'm going to take you through some of the experiences we have at IFAD. But before we do that, let's see. Let's try and understand maybe what is IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. And I think we would say, if you look at just the name, that should really give you an idea what IFAD is. So IFAD is both a UN agency, and at the same time also a fund. So it's an international financial institution. So it has two identities, both the UN and international financial institution. And like we heard from the first speaker, FAO is the mother of all the Rome-based organizations. So IFAD was actually born from FAO. So everything before was FAO, but the IFAD was born from FAO about 40-something years ago. So IFAD is really working to eradicate poverty and hunger in developing countries. So again, we talk about SDG 1 and SDG 2. And this it does through low-interest loans and grants, which are developed with financing projects that enable rural poor people to overcome poverty and also hunger and malnutrition. So two SDGs, SDG 1 on poverty and SDG 2 on hunger and nutrition. So I think those, if you remember those two, then I think then you have a very good idea of what IFAD is doing. Like we had, almost every other agency has its own SDGs that it works towards, but then these are the dominant ones, but at the same time also we talk about the decent work, SDG 8, we talk about gender, SDG 5, we talk about climate action, we also talk about sustainable production. So there are other SDGs as well, but the most dominant ones are SDG 1 and SDG 2. So when it comes to the business model, and I really love it because I'm building on what was shared earlier today. So in terms of the business model for IFAD, it starts by interacting with the countries through a country strategic opportunities program. So this country strategic opportunities program is developed in close consultation with the government and also with other stakeholders at the country level. And it is evidence-based, looking at what the real issues are to really understand where is it that IFAD can engage with the government. What are the areas of investments that can be identified? And that program can be a 5 years program. So within that 5 years program, then that defines what the investment portfolio would look like and what are the key problems that the government wants to solve or to address. And this is done in consultation with the government, also in consultation with the potential beneficiaries who are going to benefit from these investments. So once the strategy is done, then the next thing is to develop projects or investments. So these are project designs. And these ones are also done jointly with the government. And the investment projects are already pre-identified. So we know that within the 5 years, if I am working maybe in a particular country, whether it is Malaysia or whichever country, then we know that this is really what we want to do in the next 5 years. And these are the main areas that we want to be investing in. So there's a level of clarity. So once the projects are designed, IFAD does not implement the projects. The projects are implemented by the government. So remember, these are loans. They are soft loans. So they are implemented by the government. So the role of IFAD is to really work with the governments, develop capacities, and also provide implementation support and supervision for the implementation. So that is what our role is. So we don't get involved into the day-to-day implementation. That is not our job. So that kind of gives you an overview. But then the other question you're going to ask yourself, where do we get this money that we are giving to the farmers? So within IFAD, we have replenishment cycles. FAO, we had maybe there is membership fees. IFAD has a different business model, so the money comes from replenishment. Every 3 years, member states put in money at IFAD. They contribute and they pledge. They say we shall give so much. So when they provide those resources, then the resources are provided as loans to the countries. But then this comes from governments. But the business model is also changing now. Now there's even more room now to also borrow from markets, get cheap loans from markets, and then now these loans can also now be lent on to the countries or to governments. So that is something very new, starting from the last 2 years, that now the IFAD has now, is now able to do market borrowing. The executive board has allowed it to do that. So where do we work? We work all over the world where we have developing countries, as you can see. And if you look at that map, you can see that in almost all the countries, we have at least one or other form of malnutrition. In some countries, more than one forms, like where you see the orange color. In other countries, maybe one is dominant. But one important thing I want to mention here is that when it comes to the rural areas, because we talk about overweight and obesity, we talk about undernutrition, we talk about micronutrient deficiencies, but if you look across and you go to the rural areas, some of the people there are still suffering from very, very basic and undernutrition particularly, which you don't expect that should be the case right now. So the rural areas at times usually want more heat than the other areas when it comes to malnutrition. And in terms of our work, we have 5 regional divisions. So we have the East and Southern Africa, which is headquartered in Nairobi. Then we have the West and Central Africa, headquartered in Abidjan. We have the Asia and Pacific region. Still the headquarters is yet to be determined, which country that's going to be. And then we have the Near East and Near North. Also the headquarters is in Rome. And then the other one is Latin America, which also is headquartered in Panama. So to push the agenda on nutrition, because agriculture and nutrition are not necessarily bedfellows. They don't automatically come together. It's not obvious. We think it's supposed to be obvious, but it's never obvious. So to push the mainstreaming of nutrition at IFAD, IFAD has been developing commitments, internal commitments for the organization on how to push the agenda internally within IFAD. So we can see here there was an IFAD 10 commitment, IFAD 11 commitment, IFAD 12 commitment. So when you see that IFAD 10, 11, 12, these are replenishment cycles. Like I said, this is when the money comes, every replenishment cycle. IFAD 10 was between 2016 and 2018, IFAD 11, 2019 to 2021, and IFAD 12, 2022 and 2025. So between the IFAD 10 commitments, that's when there was a decision that all the country strategies would be nutrition sensitive. So that was a commitment made by the organization. And then a decision that 33% of the projects that are designed within the 3 years are going to be nutrition sensitive. And then within the same period also, IFAD developed its first nutrition action plan. So that's the one, maybe when you go to the website, you'll see the action plan, which guides on what are the areas and how to mainstream nutrition within IFAD. Then in IFAD 11, there was an increase in the level of ambition. So from 33% of projects designed, we moved to 50% of project design which are nutrition sensitive. And in IFAD 12 now, which is starting in 2022, we have 60%. So you can see there's been an incremental increase in the level of ambition for mainstream nutrition within IFAD. So the map you see there shows where we are coming from. It's been a steady rise towards mainstream nutrition, but I see that we are moving really in the right direction, because now we can say that at least we are almost at 60% of the projects, like for the last replenishment, we overachieved our targets. So just having simple targets also helped to get people to work towards something. So when it comes to nutrition, there are different ways of looking at nutrition. There are different ways of addressing nutrition. I mean, we can do them through either nutrition-sensitive agriculture or through health perspective, or different ways of doing it. So our approach, one of the approaches that we use is a life cycle approach. So a life cycle approach, but starting with the household. So the household is the first unit that we look at. But then understanding that also within the households, we have different people who are vulnerable within the household. The household looks like a very neat unit, but within the household, you have women, you have children, maybe you have elderly people and others who are likely to be more vulnerable than the others. So within that, then we look at the child from the time the child is born all the way to, to when they go to school, women of reproductive age, the young girls, looking at the entire cycle and seeing what are the needs of that household so that they can plan for their nutrition at the household as a unit. So this is really the approach that we are using, because most of our programs, when it comes to agricultural programs, they don't necessarily, they mainly work at the household level, and the benefits is at the household level. So if we can start breaking the constraints or the underlying causes or for malnutrition within the household, then that would be one way of breaking the bottlenecks or the challenges why we are not achieving the right mix in terms of either dietary diversity or other social issues that affect the way the women are feeding or the way the children are feeding. Then the other thing also we do is to apply a nutrition lens to improve nutrition through agriculture and food-based approaches. And what this means is that we use a nutrition lens to design and implementation. We don't have standalone nutrition projects, but nutrition is part of another project. So the main investment may be in value chains, or the main investments could be natural resource management, community development, or different types of investments. And then nutrition is mainstreamed in that investment. So that means then you really have to work nutrition within the DNA of the project, because it's not going to be a standalone project. And so it is important to understand what are the entry points and what are the pathways that we can use for us to achieve that. And there are several ways that also we can make nutrition work for, agriculture work for nutrition. And one of them is really as simple as making food available. Because at times why people are not consuming nutritious foods, because it's just not there. It's just not available. So that can be by providing inputs, by providing knowledge extension services, and other knowledge they need to produce, and also to prepare the food so that they can grow their own food. This also includes home gardens, and those are predominant in most of the projects that we work with. So basically, making food available, because that's the work of agriculture, make sure the food is available. The other one also, we know that not everybody can produce everything they consume. So how do we make the markets work for nutrition? That if I am growing tomatoes, then I can buy cabbages or something else from the market. But then we also know connecting people with the markets, they need to have economic access, because if you don't have money, then I buy whatever is cheap. So part of the program is supposed to address poverty. So by addressing poverty, you make sure people have money in the pocket and that at least they can afford to buy nutritious foods. And we know that if you go to the markets, the cheaper food is not always the most nutritious. So that would bring maybe a policy dimension that you have to think about. So how do we make also nutritious foods also affordable? But at the same time, also it also brings in also a knowledge perspective that it may not be the cheapest, but it is what you need to be consuming. Then the other aspect also we work on is making sure that the food is safe and it's of quality. And quality here means it can be quality in terms of the nutrients, and it can also be quality in terms of safety. And maybe here I'll bring in the actions of maybe the agroecology, maybe whether looking at the chemicals, agrochemicals, and residues. If it is from animal sources, also seeing whether the food is also wholesome enough for consumption at the household. If it is milk, is it wholesome enough for children to consume? So these are questions that you have to ask ourselves, and then to see how do you use the extension system or the food supply chains to make sure that the food that is getting to the farmers or to the consumers is wholesome or is of quality. Then the other one is women's empowerment. And I think there's no question that if you empower women, they say you empower a nation. So where are these interventions going? So usually when women are empowered, they also invest in their own children. They invest in their own families. So it is important then when we have these investments, we make sure that they are empowering women. We don't leave them behind because they are 50%. And usually who are the most vulnerable? When you talk about women of reproductive age, they are the same ones who are going to carry the babies. They are the ones who are going to be breastfeeding. So it is important that we empower them. And empowerment can be economic. It can be reducing their workload so that they can manage their workload. And also making sure they have the right knowledge that they need for them to be able, to take decisions when it comes to what they feed their families or even what they buy in the market. Then the last box there, which I can hardly see because I don't have good eyes, is consumption. We talk so much about producing. My colleagues tell me that we have produced tons and tons of food, and that's what they measure. We say, okay, that's great. Did the people consume it? I don't know. Then we are missing the point because the smallholder farmers are producing the food. They sell it. Some of it is exported. Maybe it comes to the US. I don't know. But then the people who produced it are worse off than they were before. So are we missing something? Yes, we are missing something. So can we also make sure that when they produce, they also consume? But it's not only nutrition of others, but also their own nutrition. So how do we make sure that we don't lose that opportunity of also improving the nutrition of the producers? So that is an important aspect to think about. And we always say, let's start thinking about the farmers as producers and consumers as the first important element. And then secondly, the markets are secondary. So we did an analysis of the projects which were designed in IFAD 11. I said IFAD 11 is a replenishment period between 2019 and 2021. And you can see what the projects really were investing in. And there's a whole range of food types. And many of them really are foods of nutritional value. And I think what maybe towards the end there, you see there's wild foods, and you have neglected and underutilized species, which most of them also happen to also have nutritional value. So there's a whole range of types of interventions, and these are across all the regions in the country, all the regions where IFAD works. Then the other interesting thing about using a nutrition lens is also thinking about value chains. IFAD's investments, almost 70% are on value chains. So how can we integrate nutrition within value chains? So it is important to see then where do we add nutritional value along the chain, all the way from production to the inputs up to consumption. So we have developed a framework and an analysis that can help us really understand where the entry points and potential value addition can be along the entire value chain. And I think this is very important, because there's always the thinking that maybe value chains are supposed to have economic value. But I think beyond economic value, you can also have nutritional value, you can have a gender value, you can have a climate value, and you can have other values, even employment for young people. So there's a lot of other values that you can add. But then how do we ensure that that value is maintained across the value chains? So when it comes to the inputs, what type of inputs are we providing? Are the projects only maybe investing in maize, wheat? Are we investing enough on vegetables or in terms of value chains? So that would be one question. And with whom are we investing? Are we investing with the most vulnerable, or the ones who and are we ensuring that they're accessing even finances, they're accessing the right inputs? When it comes to the production as well, also, what type of crops are we suggesting? Are they crops which are maybe women can take decisions on, or they are purely cash crops which are for, I mean, it may be the men or others who are gaining from the profits of that production. Then looking at storage and post-harvest, what's really happening from all these other stages? Because in most of the developing countries, a third of the food is lost from farm. So how do you ensure that you don't lose? And then after the farm, then how do you also make sure that also as it's transported, it is stored properly, and it reaches the consumers at the markets. But then if you don't have also demand from the markets, then farmers don't produce. So you also have to create demand so that the consumers are also demanding nutritional options. Then the farmers can also, they can produce whatever the farmers, or whatever is needed. I mean, if there is no consumer or market demand, then you reduce that also, it does inform the production. So here I was just going to share maybe a few case studies here. So this was in Kenya and Uganda, where there was an analysis of the value chains, and one of the crops that was selected was the amaranth. And from the supply side, this was seen to be high yielding variety. So what they needed was to have to have high yielding varieties, and also use of inclusive business models for amaranth production, and introduction of efficient and environment-friendly sun drying for the amaranth. From the demand side, what the project opted to do was training on nutrition benefits of amaranth vegetables, and also training on various ways of using amaranth vegetables as an ingredient in products, and also how to also optimally prepare or to cook the food so that you don't also lose all the nutrients along the way. So the idea here was to make sure that they receive both economic value and also nutritional value from the value chain. Another example here, this is Nigeria, where there was a selection of the cowpea. The cowpea, as you know, you can use the seeds for food, but also you can also use the leaves as vegetables. And from the supply, some of the interventions that were identified was also use of improved varieties, and also promoting those which are pest-resistant varieties. Then the storage was also one of the issues that was identified, and also exploring use of bio-fortified varieties. Then from the market side, the idea was to increase market campaigns, and also looking at the food combination strategies in terms of the preparation of the cowpeas, and also adequate cooking methods, the same thing as we saw with amaranth. Then the last example here, this is from Indonesia. And for Indonesia, they identified bananas as one of the crops for the value chain investment. And Indonesia has very many banana varieties, so they had to choose the ones which have higher nutritional value, either as ripe bananas or as raw bananas, and then see what are the potential products that can also be prepared or they can process from bananas that also can be part of the foods consumed at the community level. And then this can also be sold even as snacks in schools and also by traders. So then from the demand side, the idea here was to look at varieties of bananas which have a good nutritional value, and then to see then how these bananas can also be part of complementary foods for children. So moving still on the approaches, I talked about nutrition being a mainstreaming theme at IFAD, but it's not the only one. We also have youth employment, because in many of the countries where we work, youth employment is a big issue. We also work with indigenous peoples, women empowerment, like I've just mentioned, and climate change as really as important areas where we need to build resilience. So we really need to understand what's the nexus between all these issues and nutrition, because if we don't understand, then we lose the opportunities of leveraging for additional impacts. So when it comes to youth, we still also look at what are the opportunities of creating employment, whether it is SMEs, for example, processing for nutrition, where we can also create employment for the young people. Then the young people are also agents of change. So they can also be used to bring change or even behavior change when it comes to nutritional habits or practices. In terms of indigenous peoples, the idea here is to look at their food systems. How do we promote biodiversity? How do we leverage their knowledge? Because they have a lot of knowledge that have been passed on over the years. And this knowledge is used, they know how to use it for even to preserve seeds, to select seeds, and even how to produce. So, and this is very much embedded in their culture. So whatever it is that we do should not disrupt their culture, but at least maintain their culture and at the same time build on the knowledge that they already have. Gender, I think we already talked about, economic empowerment and other areas of empowerment. And then climate change, I think we don't even have to say that. We all know what's going on with climate change. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't climate-proof it, it gets washed away by rains or drought or other issues. So one of the main things we have to do is to see what are the adaptation measures that we need to think about so that we can make the livelihoods resilient, or what are the mitigation measures the projects need to take care of. And this could also include maybe the types of crops that we select to produce. For example, using more indigenous crops, which are better adapted to the environment and which also have higher nutritional value. Then nutrition is also very complex. And we said we can't work in silos. So we really have to understand, like I said, there are many entry points to nutrition. And no one agency can do everything. We have different agencies within the UN. We have UNICEF. It deals with child nutrition. We have WHO. We have WFP. We have FAO. There are very many agencies, and they all are doing something on nutrition. So, and beyond that, if you go to the country level also, we have different ministries working on nutrition. You have agriculture producing food. You have health. You have social welfare. You have gender, Ministry of Gender. You have Ministry of Finance putting in money. So it is important that just to acknowledge the multi-sectorality of nutrition, because then that helps you to see then, when it comes to stakeholders, who do we engage? Who do we bring around the table to discuss nutrition? So it is important to go beyond the primary sector that you're working with and see then, because if you don't complete the loop, you'll never address nutrition, because it doesn't matter. If you ate all the best food, but the sanitation is not good, it will still get lost. So it's a zero-sum game. So it is important that we work together with other sectors and acknowledge that at the country level. And we already have platforms at country level for bringing different sectors together. If you've heard about the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, which has been pushing for multi-sectoral action. So, and beyond the multi-sectoral action, then we also bring in different types of stakeholders, the civil society, the farmers' organizations, research, extension, private sector, because they are all important and they do add value in one way or another. Then lastly, I'll talk about doing no harm, because then you can at times do harm when you don't intend to. So we have procedures that we use that helps us to do an analysis so that we can see that we make sure that we don't do harm for nutrition when we are doing design of investments. And these are known as the social, environmental, and climate assessment procedures. And you can see that they look at issues like food safety, biodiversity loss, maybe diseases, potential diseases that could be zoonotic, it can also be plant-based. It can also be just cultural sensitivity. We said food is culture. So how do you make sure that you don't do any harm, unintended harm, but then you do good in the project? And if you're going to do any potential harm, then you really have to have consultations and really see how do you mitigate that potential harm within the project. So I think now we look at a video which is going to summarize partly everything I said. So enjoy.
It's late afternoon, and people in Collie Hills in southern India have just a few more hours to finish cooking for tomorrow's food festival. All their recipes have one thing in common. They are made from minor millets. These 6 species of millet used to be the staple here, but in the last 5 decades, almost half of their cultivation in India has been replaced with more lucrative cash crops and government-subsidized rice, resulting in a major change in people's diets. Farmer Malaga Saringan noticed a difference when her family stopped eating millet.
Millet has more nutrients like calcium, and by eating the rice, we lost our energy. We are working in the field, so we need these nutrients. Nowadays, people are eating rice, so they are working much less.
In fact, nutrition is a major concern for India, which is home to a third of the world's malnourished children. According to the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, millets have up to 30 times more calcium than rice, and much higher levels of iron, fiber, and micronutrients. They are also hardy crops, needing little water and surviving in harsh conditions, making them far more resilient to climate change than rice or wheat. So with the support of the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, the foundation has been encouraging people to return to millet production.
It is good for your health, it is good for your agriculture, it's good for income, and it's good for India's national food security.
But is this enough to convince people to return to a crop they virtually abandoned? Well, the foundation realized they first needed to understand why farmers turned to other crops. So in the early 90s, working with Biodiversity International with funding from IFAD and the European Commission, they met with farmer groups to find solutions to their problems.
It starts with availability of quality seeds. So introduction of seed sharing and linking with community-based seed banks was the first step we took.
So in Malaga's village, the women farmers formed a group to collect, conserve and share their seeds. And combined with training in different farming methods, like planting in rows, their yields have increased by about 30%. But bigger yields mean more processing. And another challenge the project faced was that the manual pounding of the millet deterred a lot of the women. It used to take 1 hour to pound each kilogram of millet. But after the project provided these mills, it now takes Malaga only 5 minutes. So millet is now once again easily available here.
Nowadays we started eating millet. That's why we are going to the hospital less, and our children are growing very well. They have more energy and good health.
Millet has now become a staple food for these 600 farming families in Collie Hills. And this is just the start. With the right markets, millets have the potential to reach millions of people. And this is the purpose of today's food festival. The farmers are spreading the word about the benefits of millet.
If you eat millet murku, you'll grow big and strong. Now go eat, and tell your family to prepare it too.
And it's now even easier for families to serve their children these foods, because the farmers have taken their favourite recipes and turned them into a marketable brand. Now they have their own shop, and their products are being distributed across the state, changing the lives of the women involved, like Lata Chandra Kumar.
Now we have started adding value to millet production. That's why we are getting money. Before we didn't do this, and we had to depend on our husbands. Now we are earning our own money, which we use for our children's education and our family expenses.
And now farmers like Lata are about to get access to an even bigger market. For the first time, India's new food security bill lists minor millets as one of the crops the state will buy directly from the farmers for national distribution. And for Professor Swaminathan, this is a fulfillment of a mission.
The mission was not just for millets alone. The mission was sustainable food security. That means sustainable livelihoods of our people.
And these people enjoying their millet dishes at the food festival need no more convincing.
So that gives you a flavor of what I was trying to say in so many words. But then you can see how it is reflected on the ground. And these are integrated programs, so they are very integrated, so they address nutrition through different angles. Then I'll take the next few minutes to take you quickly through maybe a case study on Burkina Faso, where we have two programs which overlap each other. One is on production, the other one is on markets, and trying to address food security and nutrition of some specific communities. So that is the map of Burkina Faso. So the area highlighted in yellow is where the project is supporting, and there are different types of interventions directed at 57,000 households. So how are these addressing nutrition? So there are different entry points here. One is by improving agricultural production and productivity. And the project is producing different types of foods. It also includes fish. You can see onions there. You can see other foods, and also including vegetables. So it is really providing inputs to improve production, and at the same time also working on rural infrastructure to make sure that even the access of the inputs and even financial resources are available for the farmers to produce. The other one is strengthening the organizational capacities of the sector organizations. So the farmers are organized in societies and groups, so that also helps them with economies of scale and also entry points for knowledge and also capacity development, which is seen as one of the good entry point, because it's difficult to work with one-on-one farmers, but when they organize themselves, then they can also gather more economies of scale when it comes to inputs, production, or even markets. The other area is promoting agricultural entrepreneurship, like we've just seen in the case of India. So seeing then how do we also create employment and not just produce, but also use whatever we are producing and also maybe processing in a way that also creates employment for the young people and also for the women. Then the other strategy here is promoting nutritious foods and nutrition education and social behavior change. So this is through food festivals, developing recipes, and other initiatives, theater for development, and different ways of also pushing the demand for nutritious foods. Then the last one here, I want to show you a quick video because I see my time is moving. And this will summarize to see then what exactly is happening in Burkina Faso. It is in French, but I hope you can see the pictures.
Impacte négativement sur la vie au quotidien des populations par le fait que les changements climatiques contribuent à réduire les ressources au niveau alimentaire des populations. Et ces changements climatiques font que les aliments d'origine animale ou d'origine végétale deviennent de plus en plus rares. Le projet accompagne les communautés locales dans la mise en œuvre des jardins nutritifs. Et ces jardins nutritifs sont une source essentielle pour la séquestration du carbone. Pour dire que ces jardins nutritifs sont constitués de plantes pérennes qui sont un puits, une réserve de carbone qui contribue à réduire le réchauffement climatique.
À travers la promotion de ces jardins nutritifs à base de moringa et de baobab, ce sont des plantes dont depuis les feuilles, les fleurs, les écorces et les graines sont utilisées pour la consommation humaine et même quelquefois la consommation animale et revêtent vraiment une grande valeur sur la nutrition, notamment les vitamines A, C. Ce sont aussi d'excellents antioxydants qui permettent essentiellement de renforcer le système immunitaire, surtout des enfants de 0 à 5 ans, mais aussi des personnes âgées.
Am azentiga vada mpeke yadri base zugu shen kui pitondu ko fugzom nya kon ko la nya te ne site bala de kombari
on pama formation bio de boybo somba man pipere ne ila pame mane angi biriga man bigra te na an kala yal ni sa se namba po yawal mo sa ni jobude
tom da fogo ton pam aranga na ka ton taba ton bande ngani manamba ra patoy na tabo to wo tabo gonni da ne tamba sababa ton na ka taba ko mbire ka samba sakalga ton ka tabu ngo ngure tonte argenti sele toisa.
So that is moringa that they are processing there. They're using it for complementary foods, moringa and baobab, and it's really an agroforestry. So they plant this around their home gardens. So just to add their nutritional content of the food. So in conclusion, maybe just 4 statements I want to make. That a well-integrated food system approach is able to address both medium and long-term community resilience and nutrition needs. So let's remember what we had in the morning, food systems approach. The other one is reinforcing the capacities of farmers is key to achieve better nutrition outcomes. Then targeting women for nutrition, also interventions such as home gardens and nutrition education, helps to make informed choices for themselves and their families on what to produce, consume, and buy from markets. And finally, an enabling environment with aligned policy frameworks and strategies and effective coordination with all actors is a key driver to positive nutrition outcomes. So I want to stop there and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. You can stay up here and we'll do some Q&A. Thank you so much, Joyce. That was fantastic. Loved everything, especially the video from India. Wow. I hope we have some millet for lunch. And if you've learned something, less rice and more millet, okay? So we've all taken away a very good lesson already. It's time for Q&A. Again, the process, if you have a question, please come and say your question right here on the mic. If you want to send it by Huva, we'll have people that can represent you as well. Does anyone have any questions? I always do, but Stacy, please go ahead.
Yeah, we have one that got upvoted in Huva. So if those of you who don't know, if you like a question on Huva that you see, you can always vote with the little thumb if you want it answered. So this one had a couple of votes. How do you evaluate and produce needed nutritional requirements as far as quantity and quality around a whole calendar year?
Wow.
Any advice?
That's a big question.
Yes.
A whole calendar year in 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you brought a very important, something that maybe I didn't even mention, that seasonal availability of food is an issue. So at times you find maybe during the rainy season you have a lot of fruits and vegetables, then in between there's nothing. So what we do the calendar, the seasonal calendar. So when you're doing designs, sit with the community, look through the seasonal calendar and see what is available and which month is it available. Then you see then what is it, how can we bridge this space in between? So you can use technology like for drying, for example, drying fruits, or even processing. That is one way of bridging that lean season. But then there are also other ways that you can do it, because then you can see then what is it that we can produce during the lean season, what can we produce during other seasons, so that you see then if we use foods which are on season, then it is easier. So you don't have to go out of your way to also at times. It's still available. So, for example, for the rice farmers, so one of the technology also used in Cambodia is integrating rice and fish. And then when the rice is not in harvest, when now they don't have rice, then they grow vegetables during that season. So in that way, then at least you still have food. You have fish and rice in one season, and then you have vegetables in another season. Yeah, so and this is very specific to the context. So you can either do preservation and processing, or you can look at what is it that can be produced outside the season. And for many projects also there is now irrigation. So with irrigation you can have all year round production of food, particularly vegetables and fruits.
Thank you. Any other questions? I will ask one. If anyone wants to come to the microphone, feel free. So many of us here, Joyce, say and desire that we want to work with the most vulnerable people. And from your experience, whether you personally or with IFAD, how do we know that we're connecting with them? To rephrase the question, you know you're hitting the most vulnerable if A, B, C.
Okay. Yes. So let me give an example from IFAD. IFAD has developed a targeting policy and guidelines to really help you know that you're reaching the right people. Because there's something we call elite capture, that you can have a program which is captured and never reaches the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable are not people who will just appear. You have to go out of your way to get them. So it means then in the consultation, when you're doing the consultations and you speak to people, you have to find out who is it that is not here. So we do a lot of participatory approaches at the community level. We do village planning. And then within that, try to understand who is it. Because the most vulnerable usually don't have a voice. So they're not going to reach out or just appear. So you really have to go out of your way and make sure that they are engaging. And most times when it comes to agricultural programs, because they may not have land, they may not have the necessary input, so they stay away. So it's really using tools and instruments and processes that give them confidence to come out and feel that there's space for them to also say what it is, and packaging interventions also for them. And they can have specific interventions. So for example, if you're dealing with the landless, then you can create job opportunities for them because they don't have to produce, but really understanding what are the issues of vulnerability and what is it that is affecting them for them to get where they are. So that is one of the areas where we are working on. And we pride ourselves on working with the poor. And we know it is not always easy. Because when you work maybe with governments, they'll go along the main road. And when it gets difficult, they don't go in. So then you work with the ones who are more accessible. But then we are saying, let's go beyond. And let's really look at their organizations, how they are organized, and try to understand. Because in every community, they have a way of defining the vulnerable. Because like, for example, when we work in Rwanda, they have categories. They say the poorest of the poor will have these characteristics. The one not so poor will have these characteristics. Then now we say, okay, now let's get them. So they have a way of defining the vulnerable, and they even know them by name, because when you go to the village level, they even know them by name. So you really have to show up at where they are. Otherwise, they don't show up where you are.
That's excellent. I think all of us, yes. we can all relate that we need to know them by name. And ECHO in our community is very relational. And so it's very touching and powerful for you to say that. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Yes, just following up on that question. I think it's shorter than me.
That works very well.
Yes.
It's local appropriate technology. Thank you.
Yes, I think my question is probably there. I wanted to know, you mentioned in your presentation that you work with governments. And not all governments are responsible governments. And how do you fulfill what you just said, that you can identify the most vulnerable? When you have governments that don't care so much about their people, maybe it's churches or NGOs who may be out there reaching the very vulnerable. So I don't know how you marry that.
Yeah, yeah, I know we have very little confidence in government. So I'm not surprised by that question. And I think it's a very valid question. But these are questions these are things you think about even before you start working. When you're designing the program, because it's not the government that designs alone, we also have a team of technical experts that come in from IFAD. And they can also come in like from FA or from others. So we have a team of experts. And part of the experts are targeting experts, who then they try to understand what are the issues, and then what are the targeting strategies that the project is going to use to reach the poorest. And this is done also in consultation, because then during the design, you also have to go to the field and meet the people themselves, not only talk to the government. You need to consult with the people themselves so that they tell you what are their main issues. So once that is documented, then now we develop also now the capacities of the project management unit, because you have, when it comes to implementation, you have a project management unit that does the implementation. So it's not the entire government. So you need to develop then their capacities, and then they hire the right technical people who can also help them on targeting, and also how to use participatory processes for engaging. And it is true, the capacities are not there. They want things to be as easy as possible. So then we develop those capacities, and then now we work with the governments so that to build those capacities. And also in some instances, also we work with the civil society. Because then the civil society is present on the ground. They know where the shoe is pinching. So partnership also with the civil society also helps to bring the voices of the poor people onto the foreground, whether it is the farmers' organizations, whether it is NGOs, or other civil society, because they're already working with the interests of the vulnerable people. So those are the different types of strategies that are used. And then at supervision, we do rating of projects to see how are you reaching the most vulnerable. If not, then it has repercussions to the project and the project performance.
Thank you. Good answer. Go ahead.
Sorry, can we have one more?
I wish it was mine, but go ahead.
We've had one that's a kind of bit of a repeat. So of course, IFAD has a lot of projects going on and can't reach everyone. And that's part of where everybody in this room can be a part of IFAD's work. And so we've had a couple of questions as far as resources go. Does IFAD have resources available for us to help develop basic nutrition training for mothers, or have kind of like step-by-step guides for that value chain assessment? What resources does IFAD have for us?
Okay, so I didn't show the resources because I thought I was out of time. But then maybe when the slides are shared, when you get them, then you see we have a number of resources. We have how to do manuals, like how do you integrate nutrition in a design? So that is available. You'll see that maybe when you see the slides, and maybe when you go to our website. We also have a nutrition-sensitive value chains guide, which also helps you to analyze value chains. We have how to do guide on integrated home gardens. We have also one that we developed recently on a digital toolbox for indigenous people's food systems that we are also applying when it comes to analyzing and understanding food systems for the local food system for indigenous peoples. We also have a neglected and underutilized species framework and value chain, and also how to assess, because the value chain for neglected and underutilized species will be slightly different from the other value chains. So we have a number of guides And we also use a lot of guides also from FAO and other partners that also you can use and adapt to the country context. So these ones will be available if you check on our website. You'll find them there.